Live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicenda, Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation. Our hope and desire here at Plus One EXP is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but once a month I sit down with Aaron King and a special guest to talk about life and design through the lens of PBTA, Powered by the Apocalypse. Moves in a year-long segment we're calling Show Me Your Moves. Super excited to have Jeremy Strandberg here with us tonight to talk about Stonetop, Jeremy's philosophy to games. There's a lot out there right now about the development of Stonetop, the fact that it took a while, all those things. But what we want to dive into tonight is not just that big high-level story, but actually what are the underpinnings? What are the things that Jeremy is saying and expressing through the moves of Stonetop, the approach, and everything else? We're super excited about all of that. So if you have questions about those big picture things, that's great. We will probably be able to have Jeremy back on at some other point to talk about those. We really want to get deep into the design minds tonight. So if you have questions on those, please shout them out in the chat also too. I know we've got a lot of people watching. Oh, my chat box is weirdly misplaced. But yeah, if you're out there watching right now and you're a Stonetop fan or backer, feel free, give us a shout down in the chat. While you're doing that, let's say hi to our co-host for the evening before Jeremy introduces themselves a little bit more. Aaron, why don't you tell people who are joining us for the first time who you are, what you do, where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'm Aaron King. I am recovering from an eye injury. I'm not that cool, but that's why I'm wearing sunglasses. I am a game designer and I co-host a podcast called RTFM, an RPG Book Club podcast. We just released a new episode today with Sam Dunawald, and we cover the Bullwinkle and Rocky role-playing party game, which has plastic hand puppets in it. So you can go listen to that right now.
Awesome.
RTFMcast.com.
Love it. And then our guest for tonight, the creator of Stonetop, Jeremy, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do? They can find Stonetop online at ttrpg.link/Stonetop, but where they can find any of your other work that they want to find.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I am he, him, and I made Stonetop. Yeah, by day job, I'm an instructional designer and a software trainer, and you may know me from the blog spoutinglore.com. I was a big head in the dungeon world scene back in the teens. Yeah, Stonetop is probably the thing that I'm most well known for, but I also made a couple of other little games like Homebrew World, which is kind of a Dungeon World 1.5 specifically for short games and one shots, and then this kind of weird little dare game called Defying Danger, the RPG, which is just what if only one move, but not World of Dungeons, because yes, I know that already exists. But yeah, I inveterate tinker with games. I'm the kind of monster that starts tinkering and hacking a game before I've ever played it. And yeah, what else do you want to know?
That's it. That's great.
Stonetops.
Oh yeah. Also, I think this is one of 2 copies of the book that anyone outside of the printing press has gotten.
Anybody who isn't on a ship in the Pacific Ocean has.
And I should probably say the 2 books, because there's 2, and they're very big.
They are.
Aaron, I binged the first season of RTFM on like a road trip last winter.
Thank you.
And every time, oh man, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your co-host's name.
Max.
Every time Max would just be like, "Make it smaller," I would just be like, "Oh,
yes.
fuck."
Yeah. Well, but Max has come around. He's like, I'm waiting on my physical copy, and then we're covering it on the show.
Yeah.
So
Like
cool.
we are expediting Max's copy because we have to send a test package to internationally anyways. Like we need to send a Canada package and as a test. And I was like, oh cool, I'll send yours from this first card that we're getting right away. So it's gonna be Stonetop Summer over in the RTFM Discord server, and so. Everyone's fans of everybody. And Jason in the chat, Jason, we were saying nice things about you right before we went live also too. Aaron.
Oh, is Jason here?
Different Jason. That Jason's great also too.
Oh,
Jason Bostwick is I would say Stonetop's biggest fan. Someone who has been following the development of it and playing it for a long time. And like,
do you have a tattoo of the would-be hero icon, Jason? Because if not, you're not the biggest fan.
But you
That's
could
my
be
best friend.
You could be if you head out. So we do need to do the general thing of not just insider baseballing this the entire time. Give us the pitch for Stonetop, because that is a lot of what we're going to be diving into tonight. That's a lot of what we're going to be exploring in our conversation. But let's talk a little bit about what it is and where it came from.
So Stonetop is the kind of tagline for Stonetop is that it is a Hearth fantasy game set in an Iron Age that never was. So it's a PBTA game powered by the Apocalypse. It is very much a descendant of an evolution of Dungeon World, and the core thing that you end up doing in the game is fantasy style adventures, right? You play competent people. With recognizable, if you squint, archetypes that go out and they do adventuring stuff. They fight monsters. They go on trips through strange territory and unfamiliar and dangerous territory. They explore ancient ruins. They do get treasure and stuff. But the thing that makes it very different is that the core premise of the game is that you are based out of all the PCs are the local heroes of this small, isolated, Iron Age-ish village of Stonetop that is a nice place, right? It is arguably the only nice community in the whole region. But it's not part of an empire. There's no kings. There's no larger government that you get to appeal to. It's just you, but it is a nice place. People look out for each other. They're poor, they're subsistence farmers, etc., and they're living on the edge of survival, but it's worth fighting for. And so the whole point of all of the adventures stem from dealing with threats to that village and going out and seeking out opportunities to improve the lot of the village. And then that ends up being a little bit in tension with some of the ambitions of the individual player characters. Seeker, I'm looking at you, who is very much motivated to go out and dig up ancient treasures. And guess what? All of those ancient treasures are terrible. Or at least they're potentially powerful, but they all have very, very significant downsides if you use them enough.
Love it. Somebody was just asking in the chat that said that they had found out about it and they were wondering what the status is. We're super excited to announce, if you don't know, that yes, Stonetop is as of this week on boats over the deep, dangerous water, hopefully safe from the things below. As it makes its way to the U.S., you can pre-order a copy at ttrpg.link/Stonetop. They will be arriving. I will say this on stream, and I need everybody to hear me when I say this. This is an estimated date of arrival, so do not message me on the 9th of June and say, where are they? They will be here on or around the 8th of June. in Philadelphia and start fulfillment about a week after that. And so you can go pick that up.
Everyone who
now.
asks Tony where they are, their specific shipment.
Their
is
specific
delayed by
shipment.
another
Yeah,
week.
You want a crate level also too. But yeah, they are out and available for pre-order. If you pre-order it, they'll go out with the backers stuff. Also, if you don't, they'll go out after that. So, but yeah, no, I'm so excited. I just popped up the Steading or the Stonetop Village visual from the book, the handout, so people could kind of see. It's all about like caring for this community is a huge part of it. Understanding the community is a huge part of it. Being a member and being grounded here is an essential part. I'm super thrilled to kind of dive in and talk about that specifically, right? So that was an early on choice. Like that is really what the rest of everything, like system moved around, like different things have moved around and grown, but that was the original conceit. Was you wanted something that was about a village that you were taking care of, that was more grounded. Is that correct?
Yep. And I've said this in other places, but the core of it actually comes from a D&D 4th edition game.
I was gonna say it's the Points of Light.
It is. It's a Points of Light crossed with Vincent Baker's abandoned game Storming the Wizard Castle, where just as Vincent is wont to do, like, oh, I have a throwaway idea that's just part of something here that is, can spawn a whole game. Yeah. And that was just that, yeah, the premise of the game is you belong to a community and the community's under threat, and that's why you go out on adventures. And so we made a 4th edition game, like campaign out of it. We played that for a long time. It was right around when Apocalypse World and D&D and Dungeon World were coming out. And so I ended up hacking a bunch of concepts from those powered by the Apocalypse games into the 4th edition game. And we really just bent the 4th edition mechanics to meet our needs. But then when Dungeon World became a big thing and I started really getting into it, I started just tinkering on, what if I made Stonetop, but for Dungeon World? And I thought it would be, I thought it would be a play set, right? Something a little bit bigger than like a dungeon starter. And yeah, no. But yes, Tony, you're right. The premise of you belong to this village, you are the heroes of this village, the adventures that you're taking are on behalf of this village. That was the core premise. And every design, basically everything else poured out of that or out of the feel of the world that we had established, which was very Fallen Empire, post-Fallen Empires, low tech. Magic is dirty and dangerous, and not everybody has access to it. And and just taking that stuff and working it.
Yeah, it's
4th edition. I mean,
go ahead, Aaron.
What is a D&D 4th edition power but a move? I think the DNA is so linked. I played 4th edition for years and really loved it, and so I'm always just excited to find someone else who's like, I was influenced by this. So
if we'd been doing this at a slightly different time, behind me you'd see all of the minis that I accumulated from playing that damn game.
It's a good game.
No, it fell apart at like Paragon tier,
right?
But yeah. It had a lot going for it.
It is the classic. Well, why don't indie designers like D&D more? And we're like, well, 4th edition. They're like, no, not that one. That's not allowed.
We like 4th edition because it had an opinion.
No, so I like I said, there's tons of great conversations out there that you've had recently on the Yes Indeed pod or over on Rascal. People want to know a little bit more about your perspective on it, about Jason and Lucy, who should absolutely get mentioned in this, who did phenomenal work helping support the game also too, or giving the visual reality to it, are great. But I think we want to get really quickly into writing moves for Stonetop. There's a couple things that I want to highlight for Stonetop. So for people who aren't familiar, it is a powered by the Apocalypse system. Everything we're covering on Show Me Your Moves is powered by the Apocalypse, which means that it's in conversation with Apocalypse World in some way, shape, or form, and uses a lot of the conventions therein. But I do want to dive in, especially for you. I think your lens as somebody who is an instructional designer, whenever I tell somebody what Stonetop is as far as the physical form factor, and that it was going to be 300 page books and is now 600 page books, they're like, what all is in there? I was like, that's a great question. We're going to find out. The PDFs are out, so if you go and check it out, you're going to get the PDFs right away. You'll be able to see what's in there. But a lot of it is there are tons of well-written PBTA games out there. There are a lot of them that are really doing some great work telling you how to play the game. I don't know that I've ever met one that has better support for both, or read one that has better support for players and GMs than Stonetop. I would be unsure if there's ever going to be one that's going to do more to support players and GMs than Stonetop. Because not only do you do an excellent job of actually explaining the moves, of writing the moves clearly, concisely, and helping people understand them from the way they're written, you do deep dives into each one of the moves also too in a way that is incredibly distinctive. But I just want to kind of start with when you were sitting down, or when you are sitting down to write a move, what is that process like for you? What are you thinking through, and kind of what is your workflow for approaching writing a move?
So, it's a tough thing to say, like, what is the workflow? Because, you do something so much and you spend so much time doing something, and it eventually stops having a workflow. You just jump in and you do it, and part of your brain, like, might have been tinkering with it, and you just start to recognize and create.
But Jeremy, tell me how your heart beats.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, one of the things that I tried to do, and I hope I did well, was to sit down and like analyze what my thought process was, and actually put that into one of the chapters of making custom moves or writing moves and love letters. So, like, I don't know if you want to get into that right away, but that is basically my process.
No, we can absolutely go. That's when you asked the question, I was like, yes. I mean, that was my response. Is kind of like, which way do you want to go? Because we can go there. Do you remember where that is in the book?
Yep. If you're in the PDF on the Spreads PDF, it's PDF page 276 or page 551.
There we go.
I also just want to say, while you're finding it, this book is riddled with moves. Like, it's not just a set of playbooks with moves. In this chapter that we're about to look at, all throughout, it's like, look at this page in book 2, look at this other page in book 1. There are moves in the setting elements. There are moves just everywhere. And so, it's just a lot of work that you've done. And so I understand what you mean about, like, the flow state has come upon me. But if you are someone out there listening who is interested in the different places that moves can live and kind of trigger in the fiction, this is a great book to look at, because there are so many environmental moves, threats or fronts or whatever you want to call them. And there's one about like falling into a wasp hive. It's just you don't find that in a lot of books.
Well, and I think even before we dive in a little bit more, like, that is like, it's one of the things that I think, and Jeremy, if you have any thoughts about this before we dive specifically in the process, like, I think it is one of the beautiful things that came out of the Google Plus era of things, when OSR and 4th edition and Powered by the Apocalypse and other design conversations were much closer to each other, right? When they had a lot more proximity to each other, was the portability and procedural realities of all of those games of, hey, we're in a specific spot, what thing can we drop in there to specifically cover what we want to have happen, was happening in a way that I feel like the as much as the world is polarized and it's horrible, like, so is game design communities. Those things have moved further away from each other. So when I talk to OSR people about like moves as essentially like, it's just what you would call a procedure for resolving a very specific situation. Like, that is what a move is doing. They're like, no, they're totally different. I'm like, are they doing different things? Yes. But also, are they very much still the same thing? That's reality. How do you feel like there was a lot of influence in that space for you that helped kind of refine that early on? Like Aaron just mentioned the fourth edition, like DNA for some of the moves and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of overlapping skills and like affinities. Just in no matter what type of game design you're doing, you're working in a framework. You are, following established patterns, and a lot of those established patterns end up just kind of pointing in the same directions. Like, a lot of the joy of doing fourth ed was creating monsters and then figuring out how to express the fiction of the monsters through their mechanics and through like the tools that you had available to you. And there's a just a joy of seeing your players' eyes light up when it's like, oh yeah, this zombie has only one hit point because it's a minion, but it's a zombie, so it has damage reduction 10. So you have to like hit it really hard, but if you do, it goes down and headshot, right? Or just little things like that where you get familiar with a system, with a framework, and then your brain just starts making the connections and seeing how could I then apply this to something else. And that ability, that kind of tendency serves you really well making any type of game, any type of mechanic, including moves and including subsystems for kind of an OSR system, or even just little like rulings for a particular situation in an OSR system.
Yeah.
So I think it is just, it's like, I don't know, watercolor versus oil painting. They're both art. They're both skills. They're both, ways of expressing yourself. They're just slightly different mediums, and skill in one is going to help with skill in the other, or like help you be skilled in the other.
But oil painters and watercolors do hate each other and argue online endlessly about which one is better.
That's true.
I've heard that.
Yeah. That classic does media matter conversation. All right,
but like going back to your point about G+, right? Like, yes, it was a heyday and a golden age, and we did not deserve it, but it it did a lot of good, and it exposed me to a ton of other opinions and voices that I would not have been exposed to otherwise, even though I was mostly just hanging out in the Dungeon World pond. Like there was overlap there between the Dungeon World people and the OSR people and the, just story game people in general. And you got exposed to, the good and the bad. I think we can all think of some bad, but I met some great people there, and I learned a ton. And there's a lot of stuff in Stonetop that would not be anywhere near as good as it is without having that community to just like hash things out with people and get other people's experiences and get other people's opinions.
Love it. All right. Well, let's dive into how all that came together in writing moves.
All right. Well, I mean, like I wrote it down, so I might as well just kind of like use this as the framework. Like basically, I think of writing moves in this kind of 7-step process, right? Which is the first thing you do is you take stock, right? And whether or not you're doing this consciously and writing notes to yourself, or you're just sort of being aware of what you're doing. But that basically just is like, what are you trying to do with this? I think an awful lot of times people will, when they struggle to write moves and when they first start writing moves, your natural inclination is to copy the form of a move that you have seen somewhere else and just tweak it to apply to some other situation. And sometimes that works really, really well. But if you take a minute and stop and think, what exactly are you trying to model? What exactly are you trying, what are you trying to do with it? Like, what do you want to get out of this move? And like, do you even really need the move? Asking yourself that, like, does it add anything, or is it just, I don't know, is it just a variation on Defy Danger? Or, and if so, is that worth making? And another one that this is just, something I ran into an awful lot with cramming information into Stonetop as much as I was doing. Like, there's a lot of moves in there, but man, they are packed in, especially on the playbooks. And it helped, right? Like having a very strict and holding myself to a very strict space constraint really helped me improve over the years my ability to like just hone a move down onto exactly what it needed to be and literally no more. So like being aware of your constraints and giving yourself constraints is a very powerful tool thing. So just like think about it. Take some time, think about what are you trying to do with this move? What does it need to fit into? And what is it trying to reflect in the game? And I do think that thinking about the goals of the move is pretty important, because the obvious thing is to just have the move resolve a task, right? Or resolve some situation that comes up, but you can do so much more with a move. Like, it can frame a narrative in a particular way. It can highlight the fact that something is or is not important. It can gloss over parts of play that you don't want to play out. It can give permission to the player that, like, establish that, yes, this is something that you can do, something you should think about doing. Just being aware of all of those different things that you might want to be doing with it. And when you're starting to do this, listing those things out, like actually telling yourself, I'm trying to do this with this move. This is my goal with it, so that you have something to compare against, right? So that you know whether or not you're hitting the mark. So that's like the first part. It's just, and it's, and the more you do this, the more instinctual this will become. And a lot of times you will just already know a lot of this stuff, but verbalizing it can help. And all right, so that's step one. Step two is a lot simpler. Draft the trigger. You probably already have something from that like, by identifying what the move is supposed to reflect, you will probably have already figured out what at least a draft of the trigger is. But one of the things that I do a lot in Stonetop is play with multiple triggers within the same move. So like the classic example on that, from the basic moves, is the Persuade move. So the Persuade move starts with when you press or entice an NPC, and then that's the trigger. And then the first thing after that is not really mechanical. It's just clarify. Make it clear what you want them to do or not do. And then that's the first part of the movement. The second trigger is if they have cause to or reason to resist, then roll +X. So you get a two-step process. And if you actually follow the move as written, then, okay, we go, oh, seems like you're trying to persuade. Let's just make it clear. What do you want out of this? And then that is a little bit of a conversation. And then we go, and then that prompts really the GM to look at the NPC, look at how the player is approaching them, or approaching the situation, what they want, what the NPC wants, and go, do they have cause to resist? And if not, we don't need to move. We just, okay, great, they do it. But if they do, then we go to the dice, and then we follow the mechanics of the move. So that kind of two-step trigger can really help in a lot of cases where you don't want the move to just always happen. And you don't want it to be mind control, or you don't want it to be, like firing all the damn time. But you want to like clarify the situation or get the players and the GM talking about, okay, what exactly is at stake here? And then we go to the dice with a more, with another trigger. So just think about that, right? Sometimes you might need to like break it out, and you won't necessarily know that until you've started playing with it, right?
Right.
That might be something you come back and do later. And there's also just things to think about. And again, this is often something you come back to later. It's just like, do you need to put some limits on it? Like, is there, one of the classic things that people always would bounce off of Dungeon World is the discern realities move, where it's like, when you study a person or a situation, roll plus whiz and then ask questions about it. And, that would bounce off some kind of OSR exploration sensibilities where it's just like, just tell me about the place that I see.
Yeah.
I don't want, let me make my own inferences about it. I don't need the dice for that. But also it would literally read trigger all the damn time, and you wouldn't need it to, you wouldn't want it to. So, in Stonetop, when I rewrote that into Seek Insight, we just added a little bit on there. It's like, when you study, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like when you closely study a person or a situation and look to the GM for insight, right? So effectively, even like putting in a little limitation that is player intent.
Yeah.
That says, okay, look, do you want to make this move, or are you just asking questions?
Mm-hmm.
So like having that kind of thing in there, and that also can help prevent abuse. There's a balanced act. You don't want to like defensively write your moves,
right? But it's telling people how you want to frame the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is
right.
providing better and better context for how you specifically want that conversation to flow, which is like, it comes up all the time in RPGs of people being like, well, can't we just talk to each other? And the answer is yes, but those structures can be incredibly helpful in helping us all know exactly what conversation we're having.
You got it. All right. So you've drafted your triggers. And the way I've presented it makes it sound like there's, you're honing it at this point, but you're really not. You're just, at this point, you're just throwing something out there, and then you're going to move on with the understanding that you might very well come back and revise this, tweak it, modify it. I should probably also just mention, like, making your triggers exciting is also a big part of it. Like, you want something grabby, you want something that people want to do. And there's definitely some space for not just clarity of language, but just like evocative language in there too.
The weight of each word, you were talking about discern realities and stuff, in an apocalypse world, like, they solved it. For me, like the phrasing, when you read a charged situation, like the inclusion of charged is so important there, because without that, you don't enter the move state. You're still in, the rules-based conversation where you are asking questions and the GM is making moves when you look to them, and you're not activating any player moves unless it's charged. And I think that level of specificity is what you're talking about like honing the trigger and making the trigger like a moment in a fantasy movie or an action movie where you as the viewer are like excited and wondering what's going to happen. When
there's that classic example in Apocalypse World of like, oh, this is a charged situation. It is now.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely agree. And like, just to bang on discern realities a little bit more. The other problem that you run into with that move is that oftentimes it ended up becoming players going, hey, GM, where the game at?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because, if the GM wasn't being particularly conscious about how they frame the scenes and where they frame the scenes and where do we zoomed in, then the players are just like, we're in a tavern, we framed the scene, I'm getting a bunch of information about this stuff. What do I do? And then you discern realities, and now suddenly this, the GM's making up plots that are going on, and sometimes that's great, but it definitely, I don't know, it was definitely a thing that people struggled with a lot. I don't know. Anything more you guys want to talk about with triggers?
No, it's great. I mean, maybe Aaron does. Never mind.
No. Keep going. I'm riding along. I'm here in the process.
All right. Okay. So you got your trigger basically laid out. You know roughly what you want to do with the move, or at least it's in the back of your head. You've written your first trigger. And then from there, you start brainstorming results. Now, for this, I think the natural inclination is to go to roll X and 10 plus this, 7 to 9 this, and even more so, 10 plus, pick 2, 7 to 9, pick 1. And I think that's just, for some reason, that is the structure that new move writers always glom onto. And sometimes it works great, but I like whenever I find myself doing that, I force myself to step back and go, okay, I don't even know if I need a roll yet, right? Like, start thinking about when X happens, right? When the trigger happens, what do I see as the possible interesting results that can come out of this?
And interesting is such a clutch part of that.
Yeah, right. And also, like, what definitely happens and what could happen as a result, and start making a list. And so, as you are making that list, the results could be fictional, they could be mechanical, they could often be a combination of fictional and mechanical. But they could be like a player level thing, like ask the player, like, you have to tell us something, or you have to, I don't know, give feedback, right? Like, moves can happen at the player level too. They can be immediate, they can be ongoing, they can be delayed, they can play with the tense and happen like after the fact. And so there's all of these possible things that can happen. And then, like, I just like to just make a list, right? And then I start kind of breaking it down into, okay, these are similar to each other, and I should probably look for a way to consolidate those possible outcomes, look at them and figure out which of these are mutually exclusive to each other. Like, this can happen if this, well, then definitely not this, and kind of like put them into separate buckets. And similarly, which of them could potentially happen together. And then you might also separate them into, okay, these are good and these are bad, or these are ambiguous. And you kind of like just start looking at the different ways to bucket them and combine them and approach them, and then consolidate them down. And then the move will start to emerge from that. I don't know. Does that make sense? Okay. Right. So then you've established what might and will and could happen, and then from there, then you have to figure out, okay, how are you going to pick between the results? And again, everyone defaults to. And sorry, I just realized it's getting very dark. The default is it's going to be a roll, and then 10 plus X, 7 to 9 Y, 6 minus the. But maybe, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be a roll. And even if there is a roll, depending on the results, who picks, right? And like Vincent on his blog has spent a lot of time talking about how playing around with who picks makes a huge difference in how the move resolves and how the move feels. But the player might pick, the target might pick, right? So like fictionally, the target is actually choosing, not the GM per se, but like the target NPC is deciding what happens, or the target monsters have decided what happens. But also just the GM can pick according to their principles and their agenda. There could be a procedure, right? It doesn't have to be any of that sort of thing. And that's often best kind of like combined with another type of move or another type of thing. But like, there's an example in the Marshall playbook in Stonetop where it's like when you read someone, or when you size someone up, you get to ask them a question, and there's like a list. And then the follow-up on it is, and if they fear or respect you, then ask another one, which is just sort of like a little procedural thing that looks into the fiction, ties into the fiction, and then has a mechanical result. but it's still a procedure that you're using to decide, okay, well, how many of these questions do I get to ask? And again, and then you can have like decide by consensus, and you can have any sort of mixing and matching, right? And some of the best moves do combinations of these things. Like on a 10 plus, you pick; on a 7 to 9, you pick one, the GM picks another one, et cetera, et cetera. And again, this is just one of those things where you have to look at your possible results. You have to look at what you're trying to do with the move, and then you just kind of have to play with it and look at the different possible combinations and permutations and see which one speaks to you and draft that out and start going from there.
I think a nice part about moves too, and play with it, like you said, if you're coming from a world like D&D where if you change a number here, it changes this other number here, and then it has this effect, and then you lose a spell or whatever. Designing stuff like this, things are usually so discrete that if in the moment you've drafted up this move and someone rolls it, and then they go, oh, I can just pick this, this, and this, and then I kind of break the flow of everything and I win. It's much easier with a move to go, oh, you're right, let's just fix that. Let's mess with that real quick. Whereas in a more kind of math heavy, a bunch of numbers descended from other numbers, you can't change one without messing with a bunch of other stuff. And so I think if you're coming to game design like this with some fear of that cascading effect, you can banish the fear from you, and you can play, like you said, that getting it onto the table, getting people rolling and choosing things, and then fixing it as it breaks or doesn't play out exactly the way you want.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about feedback in a little bit, but
yeah, keeping that in mind also too, because I think it'll come up as part of that conversation that you were just in that feedback conversation. Tom in chat's asking, is it generally a good or bad idea to have one move's result cause another move to trigger? Is that too much rolling mechanics or something which can ruin the flow or something? PBTA moves have kind of you typically don't see a lot of triggering, but there are some cascading effects that you write into Stonetop really intentionally. And I think some of that's going to come up in feedback. What are you trying to get to the move to accomplish? Also, what is the move doing in the fiction, right? Are we super zoomed in on very granular moment to moment things, or is this a move that's encompassing us traveling between one city and another, and that's the move, so the moves can do different things that might matter, but it just as something as we hit beats that kind of help address that, something to bring in.
Yeah. So, I mean, just as a general statement, though, you're going to find it's very, very difficult to pin me down on should they do this or should they do that. The answer is I don't know. What are you fucking trying to do?
Yeah. My instinct is no, it shouldn't. But then I'm thinking about
specific
sagas
moves
of
that
the
do.
Icelanders,
right?
Where it's sometimes in sagas you'll
sometimes it makes sense.
Yeah, or even the harm move in original Apocalypse world. I think a lot of people dislike it, but it does work. When you're playing and everyone's kind of on, is really easy to go from one move to another.
The suffer harm move in Apocalypse world is so sorry, just a side beef. I see this in online conversations all the time where people are like, hit points bad, just set damage or set harm or, conditions or something like that. And the thing about Apocalypse World harm that's so easy to miss is that, you can just look at the number of harm that's going to happen and look at the circumstances as established and be like, oh, that's only one harm, whatever, man. Except for that fucking, suffer harm move where you have no idea what that roll is going to actually end up being. And, suddenly that one harm could be two harm. Suddenly that one harm could be you're out of it.
Right. You've been kidnapped.
Right. There's so many things that could potentially happen as a result. And so that, to me, that, I kept randomized damage in Stonetop from Dungeon World, which is one of the things that people fairly often will say, oh, I don't like this about it. And I've got things to say about that. And yes, that's a legitimate critique of the game. My general take on hit points is that they are good enough and they work reasonably well. And
the strongest of endorsements.
It's like I had to regularly tell myself I will not tear out one of the core underlying currencies of the game and, rewrite 5 years of playtesting. It's just not going to happen. So like, but the thing with the harm move in Apocalypse World is it keeps that and introduces that element of uncertainty when a PC suffers harm. They've got a lot of plot protection, but things could always go badly, and I think that's a very important element to keep to it. Anyway, that's an aside, but it's a great example of where one move can immediately end up causing another move to trigger.
Yeah.
And like Masks is full of those, right? Like where this happens, but then you suffer serious harm or whatever that move is. So I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's bad. I think that you have to be cognizant of it, and you can get yourself into a trap of, it's just move after move after move after move, and there's not even really necessarily any decision making happening that's not happening in the moves, and I think that can be bad.
And also, like, the shitty answer is like, if they're both good moves, then it's good. But if the moves are bad, it's bad to roll multiple in a row. Like, it's just for Sagas of the Icelanders, there are all these moves that, if you roll poorly on a move, you might then suffer grave harm, which is another move. And suffer grave harm is awesome. It's so good. I just wrapped up a really short campaign of it, and in the finale, they were going all out, and they knew what was on the line, and two people rolled suffer grave harm, and they both just died.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. It was perfect for the story. It was perfect for the rhythm and the other moves they were making. And in that case, yes, roll a move and then roll another, please. Yeah. But
I think
they're such good moves.
The good generalized advice for me has always been like, does the move feel like it did a complete thing? Like, even if it goes to another move, like that is for me, like, did this move matter essentially? Like, if not, like, and I think this goes back to that first question of taking stock, Jeremy, that you were talking about, of like, do we need this move? And if we don't, then it's probably a bad idea to have us doing multiple of them in a roll. And if we do, then it probably will not matter if you end up doing, like, in Apocalypse Keys, there were, like, when we were playing with Ray, there were a lot of times where one move would shift the fictional positioning around so much that it felt totally complete, absolutely powerful, incredibly distinctive, but it would immediately make another player go, okay, but now here is the thing I am doing that is angling at a move in response to that moment also too, because it's opened up something new that my character can now do that wasn't a situation right before that, right? So I think you can see that in play, because it's just gonna, does it matter and does it make sense are going to be the big ones. But yeah, were we on decide, we decided to pick through the results, and then so I think we're on 5. If there's a roll, how should it work?
Right, so we've taken stock, we've figured out what the trigger is roughly, we've figured out what like what could potentially happen, and we figured out how we're going to decide. And then if how you're going to decide is a roll, then think about how the roll works. And you the classic one is roll 2d6, add stat 10 plus 7 to 9 6 minus, and 10 plus yay, 7 to 9 okay, and 7 to 9 or 6 minus boo. But like, there's so many variations that you can do on that, and like it's worth your time and your effort to think about that. Like, do I need to be rolling a stat? Can I roll plus questions, a la Pasión de Pasiones, right? Can I? Is there like a hold that I can have you roll or modify? Should I modify the roll with something else, like, in this circumstance have disadvantage, etc.? And some of these things are going to be flavorful. Some of them are going to be thoughts about like when and how this move will pop in. For example, if you're doing a move or you're creating a move that is going to involve all of the player characters or an unknown number of the player characters, at least think about not having them roll a stat of one of the player characters.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a clear leader, sure. But if it's going to be everyone working together, well, then that's a great chance to use a plus questions type of move. So think about where it fits. Think about how your move is best situated by having, by that roll structure and what you roll and what your targets are. And also, it doesn't have to be a move, right? It doesn't have to be a standard 2d6 roll. I don't use a lot of these in Stonetop, but like, especially when we get into the Arcana, some of the magic item type stuff, in order to put in, to make it feel less in control, or like less controlled for the players, or to just have like risks that are separate from the outcome, right? Just like, does this cost you something? Does this progress something? We'll often use some kind of a risk roll, where you like a die of fate roll, where after, in addition to whatever happens here, roll the d6, and if it's under this track, then bad thing happens, and if not, then add 1 to the track, or something like that.
Toucan Wizard from chat is asking a really great question, which is, can we clarify what we mean by plus questions? Is this where you ask +1 for each question?
Oh, yeah.
Get +1 for each question you say yes to. And generally speaking, yes, that is what it means. However, you could write a plus questions to mean different things, or have different things that add the +1 to it. But that is
right.
In Passiones, or in one of my favorite PBTA games, Patchwork World by Aaron King. That is how it works, generally speaking.
So, little known fact, one of the first hacks that I made was a fantasy heartbreaker type game called Heartbreaker World that I just called it that. And it was like one of those, just make it over a weekend, see what it looks like. But it was a fantasy D&D style fantasy game that was all roll plus questions. And I think I made it in 2014, right? So like, it's old school. It's a tech that's been around for a long time. It's just, hasn't been done well until some of those later games.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been like, the DNA for that kind of thing has been around. It's even in Dungeon World, right?
Yeah.
Like the carouse move is a roll plus questions. Maybe not a very good move, but so anyway, I just wanted to throw one of my favorite ones from Stonetop as a roll plus questions move, and that is, sorry, I gotta see this. When you stand at the crossroads under a new moon and call the departed by name, roll and add +1 if you are tied to them by blood, +1 if you bear a possession of theirs, and or +1 if you offer food or drink that they loved in life.
Yeah.
And at 10+, their shade appears in pick 1. On 7-9, their shade appears in picks 2. And, these are all not good things.
It's
so
the
right there, you've got like I think a fairly evocative set of rituals that are involved that kind of tell you what you need to do and kind of hint at some of that old like standing at the crossroads stuff. But then also it's, a 10+, you still pick a bad thing because you're fucking calling up the shade of the dead. That's not going to go well.
Well, and you mentioned like, which I really liked, a move just having like, this thing always happens. It's not tied. You can have the roll and have other choices, but this thing always happens regardless. And the classic is like exchange arm in Apocalypse World. Like when you're fighting, you're gonna get hurt no matter what. But I think playing with that, this always happens thing is not underdeveloped, but it's a nice little crunchy surprise that you don't see in a lot of moves. And like if you're watching a John Wick movie, what always happens? Watching a movie or reading a book and finding these tropes and pulling out stuff like that, like John Wick always finds a new gun or something. You can play with those things in a really fun way that inform the fiction, and it can be always a bad thing or always a good thing. And again, it gets at giving permission to the players to always have something or always accomplish something, and then leaving other stuff up to chance. moving those bits around can be really juicy when you're writing moves.
And we talked about we had Jason, which I didn't realize it didn't kick over to YouTube, so we'll get that uploaded over there. It was on Twitch. We had Jason Cordova on. Talked about the labyrinth move specifically a while ago, which also had a 1 to 3. If you rolled in a 1 to 3, that you basically dropped everything you had and run off in a random direction, and it's called the labyrinth move because it's just a move you can use to navigate a labyrinth to an unknown end that you can kind of shape the move around. But the 1 to 3 is not a common result mathematically, but it's also not a common standards like spread. It was just Jason wanting to do something especially nasty on a very low roll to say, yeah, you basically drop everything you have and run off in a direction without tracking where you're going and get totally lost in the labyrinth and start all over again from that point if that happens. And so like starting to explore like not only the always have, right, because there's some things in that, but also what is that structure on even the rolls and other things like that are such great ways to flex how the standard structure looks.
When you can put a morale check in there, like a D&D, you can have a result for a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5. You can turn it into a random table from D&D. There's an arcana that does basically like Siren other kind dice.
Mm-hmm.
Like you roll and you're putting the different dice in different buckets, like based on the numbers, which is so perfect. And I loved it. I love the idea of like, oh, someone finds this and literally setting a printed version of that card out in front of someone. And it's like, all right, roll a bunch of dice. And then you get to put them on this card and each one kind of activates different results. That's brilliant. And so that's another one, which do you remember which it's like a storm?
Yeah, there's two. There's a minor arcana that do that. There's a minor arcana called the Horn of Storms. And then the trigger is when you get good and drunk from the horn, you summon it like marketability, something always happens, right? Because you've gotten good and drunk. And then I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like 3, it's a bunch of D4s, which is weird because nobody likes rolling a fistful of D4s. What is this? Triangle agency? So yeah. But you roll a bunch of D4s, and then depending on where you put the results, that's going to determine how quickly the storm comes on, how big the storm is, and how destructive it is, I think, and then how long it lasts. And I think if you get even more drunk, like dangerously drunk, you get to like roll an extra die, and then one of them you don't have to use. But that means that you're just like now seriously fucked up in the middle of this storm that you have now summoned, and you better hope that you get to put the dice where you want.
Yeah.
And that's not a metaphor or anything. It's a literal.
Oh shit, dude! I'm so bad about actually intentionally making metaphors. I almost never have an intentional metaphor in mind. It's almost always something that comes out subconsciously.
Yeah. Sometimes you get real drunk and a bunch of stuff starts happening around you, and you got to just struggle to control how long it lasts and how bad it's getting.
And it's not your fault, right?
Yeah,
like, it's just happening around you.
Every time I drink out of this horn, this happens. What a weird world. So
anyway, there's another one that does something similar when you like call up a deep one out of a body of water, and then you get to roll and see, like how much control do you have over it, and how dangerous are these things, and how many of them are there, which is again another problem if you don't have very good control over them. Anyhow, so once you've kind of thought through your roles and figured out roughly what you want your role structure to be, so now you've got your trigger, you've got some potential results, roughly how you want things to be picked, and if there's a role, you've started thinking about the role, and by this point you've probably already started to draft the move, but if you haven't, now's the time to do it. And then this is where you actually like write the whole thing out. And again, you will probably be doing this as you most people, I think, are kind of already writing the move as they're doing all of these things. But if you haven't yet, now's the time to do it. And then you get yourself a full draft, and then you start editing.
No
And-
RPG book before has told me to edit. I think this is the first time I've been reading an RPG book and it goes, make sure now do your line edits, do your copy editing, your proofing.
Everyone,
Gygax would never.
yeah.
Well, and one of the things that it does actually say check grammar and formatting in there, right? That is one of the things.
Edit for length and
and
clarity.
it's important, right?
Yeah.
Parallelism helps people understand this stuff.
And we talked about clarity and like the punch of a carefully chosen word. And so I think write a long ramble and then you can fix that in editing and in cleaning it up.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's just no one, so many RPG books, there's that famous like how to draw an owl graphic, and it's like draw 2 circles, then draw the rest of the fucking owl. Stonetop does not do that. Like Stonetop goes into every step and never plays that dirty trick on you of like, and then just do it right. So
I have to imagine that it is doing that to some extent, right? I there have to be blind spots where I've just just do this.
Probably, but I think the other big benefit, and this goes into the kind of that last step of getting feedback. Like the Stonetop was developed. I mean, here's the benefit, and it's really. I remember when Jason walked up to me and started talking about us doing fulfillment for Stonetop, I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm a backer." And Jason was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, I'm also a designer. I don't fucking care. I backed this because I wanted a cool game. There have been continual updates. There's been consistent work. People have been playing Stonetop for years. Anyone who's complaining at this point, which if they're out there complaining, you're welcome to your own feelings. I just don't have the same ones. The game existed, and the amount of feedback y'all get to have that went into that total process of you running it and playing it and writing it and other people playing it and being able to create it, helped fill all of that out. That feedback process means that, there still blind spots? Probably, right? They're going to be so much smaller than your average game because of the amount of development, play, and lens in which it was approached. To me, reading through it, it is so clear. And it is, again, one of my favorite things about the text is I think there's a lot of people who, when they read a PBTA game, are like, but I don't know exactly how to do this. And in Stonetop, the answer is, well, here's the page you flip to where I've told you explicitly how to do this, right? And it is so consistently in there that you're not making assumptions on anything other than the fact that the person can read the game in English for the most part. In my initial read through of it, right? Obviously, if it's somebody's first RPG, there may be some that exist in that realm, but for the most part, there's so much support for the person reading this for the first time or the person who's trying to run the game for the first time. And it's even if you don't need to know all that up front, because you can clarify it at the table when that move is triggered and have that conversation to make sure everybody's on the same page. It's one of the great things about PBTA games, but the game supports it explicitly well.
And one of the things that I tried to be very clear about in the game too is that, you're not going to get it right the first try. There's a section in the Running Stonetop game or chapter about GMing as a practice, and just talking about the fact that you get good at doing this by doing it and by reflecting on it and by trying to do better about it. And it gives you some tips to do that. And there's the whole game ongoing chapter is largely about how do you spend your time between sessions? What are some things you should do? What are some things to think about? How do you prep? And then how do you start drawing things to a close as the game keeps going? So I tried to do that stuff, and I also tried to do some stuff that to cover things like, look, how exactly do NPCs fit into the GM move framework and the principles of a GM of being a GM. So I'm glad that came across to me.
For sure. I mean, like I said, and even I put the page up of the outline of here's how you do this. Each one of the bullet points that we went over has at least a full page of additional supporting, explaining more than we've even talked about during this time, right? Providing specific examples, drawing you in, hooking you. If you're like, I don't know how to write a move, like you can read this and within 20-ish pages, like you will know how to write a move, have examples of each, and be able to go cross-reference in the book like what it is talking about. It will not leave you wondering, okay, like that was helpful advice, but like at the end of it. No, I think it's
maybe Jeremy's way
tremendous.
of passing on the curse.
Yeah.
Now that you've been doing Stonetop for so long, you have put the game design infection into this book, and now someone else can grab it, and they can spend
That's right.
a significant portion of their lives developing the next step.
That was one of the moves to
whoever
unlock.
that is.
It's a gift.
So one of the things Jeremy had to do to unlock the Arcana was pass the curse onto somebody else.
Right.
So sorry, last thing that I just want to say about reviewing and revising and like ending these things. Like you're gonna have a draft of your move. It's not gonna and sometimes that first draft is fine. Right. If this is a one-time move that you're going to use once in your game and it's for your friends and they're the only people who are going to see it, fuck it. Just take what you got and that's good enough. Right. Just go with it. But if you're making something that's going to get used over and over and over again, or you're making something for public hate, like you want to share it with a wider community, or if you just want to hone your craft, then spend some time on it and, look at your goals, make sure it meets your goals, make sure it fits into your constraints. Remember that your players and their predilections are a constraint. Think about like, is it fitting in the fiction where you want it to fit? Is it generating the outcomes you want it to outcome? Something that I would do, and I was working on different variations and iterations of this, and this is for the like die-hard designers, not the I'm making a custom move to use in my game for one night. But if you're like really thinking about, okay, I want to change this and hone this, don't just take your move and put it in front of players. Take this move and run it through its ropes yourself. Do solo play. Like actually craft a scenario in your brain, write it down, and write out the like story for yourself of what does this player say? What does this player say? What does this player say? And run it through and see like, okay, well, let's say that we did this and they get a 10+. Okay, now how does that play out in the fiction? And if they did a 6- and I had to make a hard GM move, how does that play out in the fiction? And doing that is just such a useful way to identify for yourself, like, okay, these are some obvious problems with this, or okay, it's not quite doing what I want it to do, or I didn't actually need it to do this. I could have just said, oh yeah, this happens. And that, I mean, that's how a lot of the polishing happened on a lot of the moves in Stonetop. And then get feedback from other people.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And like, again, there's just to shout it out, like the Stonetop Discord exists. Like if you want to share your moves with other people, get feedback like that, like you should go check that out. If it's not, I don't think I linked it. We'll link it. It's ttrpg.link/Stonetop Discord. We'll take you there though. But the other thing I want to say is like this evolves into we want to talk about love letters specifically, right? Because this is another distinctive thing that this kind of evolves into as a practice that is something that is like will get referenced a lot in different PBTA games, but this was a really great kind of deep dive into it, like as far as your write-up is, in a way that made me more excited about love letters than I think I've probably been when other people mention them, because they're an idea in most of the games I play, but it's never something that's come up at the table. And therefore I was just like, oh, I like this idea. It's fun. Like, this is a cool thing. They're serving a very clear function in Stonetop also in the way that you've written them. I think they serve that same function in other games also too. The way you wrote it made me go, oh, I love this. I want to do this more. So for people who aren't familiar with what love letters are, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so a love letter it's sort of a one-use custom move specifically written from the GM to one of the characters. Typically, then it's like written between sessions, and then you hand it to the player at the beginning of the next session. And it's written kind of conversationally. Sometimes you'll get a very you'll get GMs who delight in a very opinionated voice, right? I don't know, like it when you see it. But it sometimes it's just very practical and straightforward. Sometimes it is kind of winking at the character and the player at the same time. Sometimes it's just like expressing opinion through careful choice of words, blah 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 blah. Anyway, the point is that what you're doing with these is you are using them to gloss over downtime or to re-establish or resolve some sort of a project that has been happening that you didn't want to play out, or reconnect the characters with each other, like wrap up a situation that you didn't want to play out at the end of the last session. So like in one of our playtest campaigns, we ended a session with the PCs having raided a mercenary encampment and like causing all sorts of chaos. And they'd already mostly accomplished their primary goals, but they were still in there and they were still dangerous. And we didn't want to spend another session with them like getting out of there. So I just wrote love letters for everybody of like, okay, how bad was it getting out of there? And I did not check the hit points on the characters before I did it. And the heavy ended up very intentionally picking a choice that would cause them damage. And he had 3 hit points left, and he rolled a D4 and he lost 4 and became a fucking ghost because of a love letter. So they can resolve a whole situation if you just didn't want to play it out. And they can be pretty impactful. For example,
Jeremy loves somebody so hard that he died. That's crazy.
Big hugs.
Yeah.
Big
hugs. The Xist and the O's. I love it. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, but I just want to say, and it's particularly a useful piece of technology for Stonetop, because in Stonetop, you're so often skipping over weeks or months of time, and then you're just zooming back in to see, hey, where are we with this?
Yeah.
Also great for if someone misses a session or two.
Yeah.
Then you can give them a love letter about what their character was off doing. They're great pieces of tech, but the use case is small, I think, smaller than most moves, and so they don't get the love that
the letters.
Well, I think a lot of players find them intimidating, or a lot of GMs find them intimidating.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because it's a lot of work to write something that you're only going to use once. And if you don't do it very often, then you don't build up the skill and build up the chops. And I flip it and think of it as this is practice writing moves.
Yeah.
So why not just practice? And yeah, sure. If it's a one-off thing and it's not great, fine. It still does the job, right? You communicated what you wanted to, and you kicked off some aspect of play. And it's a learning opportunity. If you write something that's too complicated or not clear, then you learn that, and then you adjust on the fly with your friends.
Yeah. No, like I said, it's one of those things that I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't come up at any table I've ever played at, because no GM I've played with is I'm gonna spend that time in between. I also think and I have 2 thoughts. I'm going to use this to kind of transition us into one of my other questions, but I do want to come back to Arcana a little bit around this also too. A lot of times in PBTA games, the attraction to people is the sense of so much is going to happen at the table that I don't have to spend a lot of time prepping, right? And so love letters work against that. I also don't know that that's necessarily. I think while that's good, it oftentimes means that the GM isn't doing the work between sessions that they maybe ideally should be doing. And that you do a great job of outlining that type of prep in here, the things that GM should be thinking about. I think everybody GMs in a different style, and I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum on that. That's not my intent in that. But I do think it is one of the things that why it comes up in some PBTA games as an option. There's not necessarily a lot of guidance, and it's like, oh, but I'm playing this so that we can roll dice, and I can't just be kind of making up plot on the fly as we go. Maybe I've got a threat in the background. Maybe I'm just totally running off the seat of my pants. I think that's a lot been where a lot of people's attractions to PBTA at different points in its development. And so I think there's a part of that. But it's something I've already noticed because we're getting ready for a 4-part actual play. Like, I love the fact that I can already tell not only that you like how you invest in things, right, but also that there's a clear structure that you have, at least as the creator. But I think I've seen other people mimicking when I hear about their Stonetop like sessions of like what is and is not true about the world already. Like there's this line, and the example that I'll throw out that was just really clear and really great to be like, oh, I'm super into this and I love it, was when one of our players picked a name for an NPC that was from a different cultural background than what their character should have represented. And your statement wasn't, no, you can't do that. It was, can you pick either a different name or give me the reason why they have a name that doesn't match their cultural background? Like, it was a very open thing, but it was clearly telegraphing, like, I want this to be well thought out. I want there to be a reason for this. And these cultural backgrounds have a function in the world and putting Stonetop where it is. And so, like, I'm not saying you can't have that person have that type of name, but I want a clear answer. Like, there's more of a structure to what you're doing in Stonetop than I've seen a lot of people approach in their PBTA game, where there's a lot more negative space. I guess I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit, if that makes sense. That was a long, and sure. I want to hear that. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that people approaching Stonetop can definitely be intimidated by, right? Is that, like, this is the setting book, right? Like there's a lot in here. But as you said, a lot of it is it's framework. It's not necessarily a Bible, right? You don't have to stick, to every little detail in there, and a ton of the stuff that's in there is just examples or questions to think about or questions to ask the players. But there is definitely some stuff that you kind of want to get right, like and some of it runs right up against the expectations and the tropes of traditional TT, like fantasy role-playing games, right? There are no shops. There's not a tavern. There is a public house in the town. There is, you don't have jobs. You don't have you don't get paid by somebody in Stonetop. There's no coin. It operates on a communal honor and debt and promise and gift economy. And people can bounce off of that really hard just because they expect it to be a certain way, and they don't necessarily, they don't grok it immediately. So I do actually spend some time in the game talking about, in the book text, talking about, like, look, these are some of the misconceptions that people are going to come or bring, and don't just, when somebody says something that asserts a particular, like a disconnect, don't just tell them outright, no, it doesn't work that way. Go like, well, you probably don't have shops in here. Like, people in Stonetop don't really have shops, but I get it. You're like a merchant from down south, and you have merchant stuff. We can certainly say that your place is set up like a shop, but I want you to know that, like, the people in Stonetop are going to have no idea what a shop is.
Yeah.
And or like you were saying, somebody just picking a name from a different list. And in that case, I was more just like, I recognize that as an inconsistency. I'm not sure that the player recognized that it was an inconsistency, but I don't want to just make an assumption and tell them they're wrong.
Oh yeah, no, it was handled incredibly well. It was hey, can you pick another name or tell me why this is the name that you want to have? And we got a table of people who were all in for it. Like, it's not but it was such a great example of, like, hey, this isn't just like, oh yeah, you got a fighter, like what's their sword? Oh, their sword's made out of like moonstone. Great, cool. Like let's go, right? Like it wasn't just
Yeah.
the hey, we're just gonna roll with whatever happens. It was clear. And
Well,
part of the reason Aaron and I started this series and this conversation and the conversation around making hard moves was a lot of people who run PBTA see it as hyper collaborative, which it is, but they don't know how to have that conversation, that exact conversation that you were doing, which frames how
Yeah.
soft moves and hard moves work for a GM. If you can't
Mm.
challenge back on an idea of saying like, oh no, here's like a cultural expectation we have to address in the world, or here's a place where that is a disconnect, you lose some of that, right? And it was a very small but clear example of, oh, I'm super excited to get into this because we're really going to be exploring the world even as we're collaboratively answering questions and creating some of it, which is what PBTA does so well.
Well, and I guess like there's kind of two directions that makes me want to go. One is simply, I think a big thing that like is necessary to help people have those conversations is scaffolding. I a thing that I will constantly go back to is that creativity needs hard edges to crystallize off of. You can't just ask someone, like, what do you think about X, and expect to get something good out of them. Some players will just like spin whole cloth amazing fiction out of their butts, but the vast majority of players, if you just ask them what's magic like in this game, they're just going to be like, it's really common, or like you have to go to wizard school, or something like that. Just whatever first thing comes off their head, and it's going to be kind of mushy. But if you give someone like harder discrete edges to build off of, and give the GM good pointed questions to ask, then suddenly everybody starts just firing off of each other. Yeah. And you start creating these elaborate things. I've never had two groups of Stonetop, like two groups where Stonetop felt the same. Mm-hmm. Like it always feels a little bit the same, but like the characters and the dynamics and the problems that the village is dealing with, they're always so different depending on who your players are and how they answer those questions and the decisions that they make right at the front. And the whole of book 2 is written to kind of build off of that and scaffold it and elaborate on it and give you a lot of space to play around in that area.
Yeah. Aaron, I want to give you a little bit. Did you find any cool moves in the book? You think you want to ask for getting near to get the right time?
Them falling in a wasp nest. And a whole little suite. This is Jason Bostwick, Stonetop's second biggest fan, pointed the wasp moves out to me. But just the fact that like what other RPG is going to have a whole little suite of moves for when you're in the wasp/goblin nest and you're interacting with the wasps. The Horn of Storms also was a top one. Just I think Other Kind Dice, which is the system that Cyrun uses, which is a Meg Baker game that I think is on Kickstarter for a new edition right now.
It's going to be next month, and you and I have to email with Meg later this week to figure out when we can do a pop-up Show Me Your Moves to help Meg talk about Cyrun, and because it's also the system that Richard used to build Moonlight on Roseville Beach off of also too.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Also, if you've ever played like Dicey Dungeons, the computer game.
Oh yeah.
It's a similar thing where you roll a bunch of dice and you put them in different buckets. But those were good for me. The moves that broke kind of the expected roll pick from a list or whatever. I just always like to see those. And the hyper specificity moves that are just so discreet and tiny that's like, you're not going to be wandering through a wasp nest very often, but if you are, here's the page. Yeah.
Can I share with you guys what ended up being my favorite accidental move in the
absolutely
game? So if you look at where is this? It's in book 2, Tony.
Gotcha.
On page 454 or 228 in the PDF.
I'm using the pages version.
All right, 454.
Cool.
But it's the lightning move.
All right, I got it up. All right, you want to read it out loud for everybody?
Yeah. When you get struck by lightning, it's not necessarily a sign of Tor's displeasure, but it probably is.
It's good.
It wasn't meant to be a move. It just happened to get like I think when Jason was laying it out, he just instinctively win you and then bold and highlighted the text.
Yeah.
Or the get struck by lightning, and I was just like, nope, we're keeping that.
Yeah. Oh god, that's so good. Yeah. Pose gestures. The options are for that danger: flash in the distance, rumble ominously, paint the sky with bright white bolts, boom, deafen and disorient them. A bolt starts a wildfire, which is referenced over to page 130, which you can, by the way, click on, and it will take you to page 130 in the PDF, because Jason did all the tooling for the PDFs.
It's crazy.
Hair stands on end. Bolt strikes near you. D 10 plus 2 damage. A bolt strikes directly death's door. So we'll go to the next page because it's got some great art by Lucy on it also too, of a lightning bolt striking a tree.
Anyway, so that actually is kind of a transition to I think what you wanted to talk about, which is like that conversation of soft moves and hard moves and the structure of it in Stonetop. Like,
yeah,
we've gone like an hour and a half. So
more. I mean, I will be done soon. But I don't want to keep anybody too long. But yeah, I mean, more. I think less than Stonetop, more your approach to it, right? Like, because even as I'm reading through, I'm like, God, I'm so excited because like a lot of things that are obviously soft moves for you, most GMs would be like, oh, that move's too hard, right? Like it's very clear that you've written a lot of the different elements to be flexible on, is this a soft move? Is this a hard move? You as the GM make the decision to present it, right? So I think what's more helpful is actually like your way of thinking through when you're at the table, and that may be going into the book, right? But like your way of thinking through the table, like what you're trying to accomplish with a soft move versus a hard move, and what would be helpful for GMs running Stonetop or other PBTA style games to hear about that.
So one of the things, going back to my days in G Plus and then in Reddit and the Dungeon World community, that would happen an awful lot, is you'd get GMs coming from kind of a more trad background, especially games that have initiative, right? And there's, like you take a turn and you have an action economy and all this, helping them understand particularly how action scenes would play out in a PBTA space. It was always tricky. It was always hard. And there is those of us that like just grokked it and did it really well were doing some stuff that was not immediately obvious to the people that were used to a structured style of play. And I spent a lot of time trying to explain it to people, and then on like writing blog posts to kind of break down how it went. And one of the things that I realized in doing that is that there's a kind of traditional purist PBTA approach of, well, when does the GM make a move? And the GM makes a move when a player rolls a 6-, or like a miss, when a player move tells the GM to, or when the players hand you a golden opportunity or whatever that is, opportunity on a silver platter, or when everyone looks to you to see what happens, or when everyone looks to you. And at the very extreme, you've got some folks saying that like everything that the GM does is making moves.
Mm-hmm.
And to which I say that is not helpful. Like, if I am a new GM coming to this style of play, I need a little bit more structure, and I need I need someone to acknowledge that there is a loop to this. There is a cycle to it, and it's not a perfect cycle. It's not like a constant like like flywheel, but there is a general structure, which is you establish the situation up front, right? And that is, where are we? Who's here? What's going on? When is it after the last time or after whatever happened last? And that could be we're exactly where we left off with the last time you said something, but here's what's happened as a like in the meantime, or here's what's going on. Or it could just be that I turn from Tony to Aaron and I say, okay, Aaron, you just saw this happen to Tony, blah, 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 blah. And that's not me making a move. That's just setting the scene. That's it, just establishing where we are and what the situation is. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that you do during that is not making a move. It's just talking. It's just establishing. And that can be descriptions, that can be actually like portraying NPCs or describing what monsters look like or are doing. It can be asking questions, right? All sorts of stuff fits into that. Not actually a move, but just figuring out what's going on. But once the situation is established, one of two things is going to happen. And that is either one of the players is just going to grab the reins from you and say, I do this. At which point, great, right? And unless you have a reason to say, no, hold your horses. If somebody takes the initiative, just let them do it. But otherwise, in my experience, and this is my experience, this is not necessarily true for everyone. I especially imagine that outside of the US, like I can totally imagine like the Portuguese player base and the Italian player base looking at me and be like, you got to be kidding. My players, of course, are going to immediately interrupt and start saying stuff. But in my experience, until I direct something at a player and say, what do you do? They're generally going to let me keep talking or expect me to keep talking, especially playing online, because like there's an etiquette to playing online where you don't interrupt people. But it's that moment of, okay, I've established my situation. Now I want to turn it back at the players. That's the moment you make a soft GM move. And in my opinion, every soft GM move boils down to saying something that provokes or that provokes an action or reaction from the players, or something that just cranks up tension, which is in another way of provoking action is just less immediate. Right? So if you look at the list of moves, pretty much every move could boil down to giving them an opportunity, or telling them that's like telegraphing that something bad is about to happen, or establishing that something is not what you thought, or hinting at an opportunity, or otherwise just putting something out there for the players to react to. So you can almost think of a GM move as a provocation. Or you say, okay, well, this has been happening, and in the distance, you hear this, or, you're noticing now that your torches are getting low, or you are, just establishing that something that's already on the player's minds is getting worse or becoming an issue, which is, again, just another way of provoking the players. And that's when you say, what do you do? Right. And then whatever they do, right, it's basically going to be one of three things. They're going to ask you for clarification, or for more details, or they're going to do something that triggers a move, or just intentionally say, I want to do move, right? At which point, fine, cool, like they say what move they want to do, and then you just work with them to figure out what that fiction looks like.
Yeah.
Or they say something that doesn't trigger a move, and they do something that doesn't trigger a move, at which point, okay, cool, we decide what happens. But if they trigger a move, great, then we do it, and we go to the move, and the move tells us what direction things go. And when you are resolving the move, you can look at your list of GM moves and your monster moves and your site moves, like the get struck by lightning things, and you can use those to inform how you resolve the player move. That's arguably making a GM move, but you're not limited to that.
Right.
You're never limited to the lists. They're always just there as whatchamacallit, inspiration, right? When you need it, you have something to fall back on. But then for me, a hard move is establishing badness. It's okay. They have either ignored a threat that I've already telegraphed, or they've executed a player move, and the player move has established that something bad is going to happen. Either on a 7 to 9, and it says like, you suffer your enemy's attack. That's a hard move. It just happens to come along with you also getting to wall of them. Or you get a 6-, and then it's just like, okay, whatever the GM says, but whatever they say, it should be the GM establishing badness in line with their principles, flowing from the fiction, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, that's kind of like, to me, the places where GM moves come into play. It's like, it's once you've established the situation, it's the provocation to the players, and then what do you do? Or in response to a player move that tells you, yeah, make this happen. Okay, well, if I need more details, let me pull from my list of GM moves. Or if they ignore a threat or they roll a 6-, just go hard and wallop them with something. Or sometimes the hardest thing that you can do is not actually wallop them and just twist the screws a little bit and make it a little bit longer, or make it more tense, make it raise the stakes. But that's going to depend entirely on context.
Before we have a great, horrible, cursed question from chat that I'm also wondering about. But before we do that, we ask one question every time we have Show Me Your Moves, which is just for you personally. Right now, the world is hard in a lot of different ways. The reason we started this in part was conversations around some design and other elements, but also just the desire to say, like, hey, like, this is a time where people need to be making hard moves, where they need to be looking at the world around us and what's happening and drawing those lines, looking at how we change some of the narrative that's confronting us right now, or how we add better elements to the story. For you, Jeremy, who just completed a huge work, right? What is like the hard move that you're looking for in your personal life right now? Like, is there a thing that you, as you look at the world around you, that like this is a hard move that you want to try to undertake in 2026?
Yeah, I think like the main thing for me is to take some concrete steps to reclaim my personal health. Like I haven't been like, I have not kept this secret at all, but like I had a heart attack back in 4 years ago now.